Welcome to New Way Health Podcast, where we explore topics to enrich your total well-being. Today, we're going to talk about the cascade of sugar and its effects on your body. I'm Jennifer Gilman, owner of New Way Health Coach, and with me, I have Coach Emily Abshire. Yay! So glad you're back with me because this
Thank you.
topic is amazing, right? I'm just curious, like, why are we talking about this? Why does it even matter?
Because during the holidays, I think everyone struggles with sugar.
Yes. Yeah.
Even those that are mindful of the sugar that we have in our life, it is so hard around the holidays. And I needed the reminder. So I thought
Mhm.
we should talk about sugar today.
Yeah. And I did too. So I was really glad that, after our last podcast, Coach Emily recommended this. I'm like, this is perfect for December because it is the toughest month. Some people think it's Halloween that's the toughest, but it's actually December because it's like you basically start at Thanksgiving and you don't stop. That's many people's journeys. And I'll say, for speak for myself, that was my journey in the past too. And over the years, it just got better and better and better year after year. But sugar is like a noose around my neck, right? As soon as I dive into it, I want more of it, of course, right? So it hijacks my brain, and I'm sure some of you listening might relate to that. That's why we wanted to tackle it so we can really talk about the whole cascade, right? So what is the cascade of sugar? Like what happens? I'm going to call upon Coach Emily because she is a registered nurse for many years, like what, 18 years now? Yeah,
20.
20. Oh my God, 20 years now. So let's hear from nurse coach Emily, really about the science of it, right? So tell us what happens in the body when sugar is consumed. Take us through that.
Yes, sugar is considered a carb, and it will trigger our pancreas to do a lot of work by pushing out insulin. When our cells have our bloodstream has a lot of sugar in it, then our pancreas says, hey, we better get the insulin, do its job, and then the insulin will piggyback with the sugar, and then it tries to get into our cells. And
Mhm.
then our cells have to decide, what are we doing with the sugar, right? If you're moving, if you're working out, it's great. Your body can say, oh, good, she just ate some carbs, sugar. I'm going to use this for a source of energy. Let's say we're sitting at a desk afterwards and we're working an 8 to 5 job. And it's like, oh my goodness, we just have all this sugar in our bloodstream. Insulin is doing its job. It's going to take it and shuttle it somewhere, but you're not moving. You're not utilizing that source of energy. So it's like, where do we store this? Stored in your fat because
Ah.
surely this person's going to use this energy later on. So that's how we store it in our fat. And then the fat just accumulates because we never use that energy.
Mm.
Um, and then, of course, the cascade of everything else that happens. So your pancreas is pushing out insulin. Pancreas is working really hard, has to do something with that blood glucose. And then it affects your brain.
Mhm.
If it's storing into fat and you're just sitting, then your brain starts to get a little bit tired, maybe some brain fog, or you lose that clarity, forgetfulness, because your brain is living off of sugar.
Mm.
Brain doesn't thrive off of sugar, it thrives off of ketones, but we're constantly feeding our brain sugar, and therefore we don't have that vitality and that clearness. And that's why sometimes we get brain fog or we get tired or we don't want to be creative. We don't want to be productive at work. Another cascade is it can affect your mood for the rest of the day.
Mhm.
And then you see yourself, why am I was in a good mood about an hour ago, but now I'm in a bad mood,
Yep.
right? So that sugar that you spike that blood glucose in your bloodstream and you have this high, this rush of energy. But then when you don't utilize it, you don't move, then when it stores it into your fat, then you get this crash.
Yep.
And then your blood sugar is
Definitely felt
low.
that. I've definitely felt that in the past, and it's just like it does not feel good. You're just like, why do I feel nothing? I don't want to do anything, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back real quick to, so obviously you're using it in energy or it stores as fat, but you also touched on something I want to call out, the brain, because there's a lot now being just shared in the news finally that Alzheimer's is potentially diabetes type 3,
Type
which I
3.
wholeheartedly believe in, and the science is
Mhm.
there now. So,
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about that? Why are they saying that?
Yeah.
Why?
Because our brain, since our brain loves ketones, it doesn't really thrive off of too much sugar, and it's going to go to the thing that's least resistant, which is sugar. But that makes our brain almost like a cloggy, like fatty. It makes it not work so good. And so it doesn't thrive in the place of constant sugar. And that's why we get these medical diagnoses, dementia, et cetera, Alzheimer's, is because our brain has been living off of sugar for so long.
And
Uh,
that's so dangerous. So, excuse me. It's so dangerous because a lot of people feel that, oh, if I don't have the genetic marker, the DNA
mm,
says I don't have the risk for Alzheimer's, I won't get it. But that has not been the case. We're seeing so many people who do not have that gene
mm,
and they are getting dementia and Alzheimer's. So I really wanted to call that out because that is very serious. Nobody wants that, you know?
mm,
Nobody wants diabetes and they definitely don't want that with Alzheimer's either. So I'm curious about, I've heard a lot about leptin and maybe
mm,
some listeners have heard too. So we know the pancreas is working really hard and eventually if it's not working, that's when diabetes happens, right?
yes.
But what about leptin? Tell us about that.
All right, so the cascade of sugar. You think you're innocently eating sugar, and then the cascade would be sugar blunts leptin sensitivity. And so leptin and ghrelin are our two hormones. The leptin is the satiating hormone. I'm full, I'm satiated. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. That happens mostly in our gut, some in our brain. But when we eat sugar, it can suppress leptin hormone for 24 hours.
Wow.
That
Wow.
means that I may not be satiated after I eat a lunch. And then I may think I want more food when I really don't need more food. And then I would tend to overeat, right?
Okay.
So that
So
leads to obesity.
when people say, like our clients say to us, I can't stop binging. Why am I binging?
Mhm.
I can't stop the
Mhm.
sugar. And a lot of times they'll say sugar too. So that is what's happening. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
And they'll say, I'm always hungry. Emily, I'm hungry after I eat lunch, but I'm still hungry. You've just suppressed the leptin hormone, that satiating hormone. So you're not sensitive to it anymore. Your brain is saying, I'm full, I'm satisfied, stop eating, but you're not sensitive to it. You're not aware that it's trying to tell you to stop eating.
Yeah.
Your
And
ghrelin hormone's trumping.
just so you guys know, we're talking about, I know we're saying sugar, but we're not just talking about the form of desserts and ice cream and candy and chocolate, but the things that turn into sugar quickly, like a sandwich bread or
Rice.
pasta, white rice, right? Especially.
Yeah.
What other foods turn into sugar quickly that you can think of?
Well, even just like I mean, I know that the candies that are obvious, right? The um
All those like
cookies and the
not good
pastries.
carbohydrates, basically.
Yeah, muffins.
Yes.
Um, even cow dairy, maybe it's a yogurt.
Hmm.
Something that, you know what, and we bring up a good point. We don't know individually what spikes your blood glucose, right? And what we're really talking about is how do I keep my glucose levels low so I can remain stable
Yes.
mood, my pancreas is not overworking. And we have hacks as health coaches that, hey, this is the order of food you should be eating your food in to decrease that spike. But yeah, what we're really talking about is what spikes your glucose. Maybe
Yeah.
a continuous glucose monitor would be wise for you to figure out what
Yep.
individually, Jen, does a banana, does a sweet
Mhm.
potato spike your blood sugar, but it does not for me.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, it would be interesting to know individually what spikes your
Yeah.
blood glucose.
That's a good point. Again, just like everyone is really different because one person might have an entire sweet potato and it spikes it, and another person, they are fine with the whole sweet potato. But also depending on what did you put it with it, how much protein did you put with it, how much healthy fats did you put with it. So the way you're putting your meals together becomes really important. Um, So I'm glad we touched on that because I don't want people to think that we're just talking about sugar in the form of desserts. We're talking about foods, other foods that turn into sugar quickly. That is also important. Yeah.
Can't hear you.
Oh, really? Oh,
Can't hear you, Jen. Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. Yep.
I can't hear you.
Huh. Let me test this really
You
quick.
started fading out and
Hello, hello, hello. Check, check. Okay. It
oh,
must be on your end.
I can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah,
We're
sorry. You
good. We're
started
good.
fading.
Yeah. I don't know what happened.
Me
So,
neither.
all right. So, what about the difference between natural sugars and added sugars?
Oh, natural sugars. Ooh, I'm gonna reply to this question, how hard your liver has to work.
Mm.
If you don't mind me continue on
Yeah.
the cascade
Yep. I'm
of
sorry.
or no, no, what organs are affected by sugar. So when we think about eating an apple or a grape, a kiwi,
Mhm.
those are natural sugars, right? And they're also coated with fiber,
Yep.
versus candy that has no fiber and maybe 8 different types of sugar, whether it's an alcohol sugar or a food dye or a toxin. The liver has to work differently based on what you're eating. So
Mhm.
if you're eating kiwi full of fiber, skin on it, or an apple, your liver loves that. Your gut loves the fiber with it, and it doesn't blunt your blood glucose as high as maybe a piece of candy or a Snickers bar,
Mm.
or a Skittles,
Yeah.
because they have way more toxins and other byproducts in it that are considered harder for the liver to break down. And
Yeah.
what do they do? What does it do with it, right? These are toxins. These are products that don't serve our body well, and they have to go through the liver, and then the liver has to work hard, because it has to break down.
Yeah. That takes me back to several years ago, when the topic of net carbs became popular. And the one thing I liked about that was it was starting to teach people to look at fiber. They're like, take your carb number minus the fiber, and now you have your net carbs. The problem is it didn't take it any further. It didn't really teach people to be like, fiber is really important. Don't just do the math. Um,
Mhm.
but at least it did introduce fiber in a little, in a better way of like, yeah, fiber should be in your food. Even back to that example of the sweet potato, it has natural sugars in it, but it also has fiber.
Yeah.
So, as well as your example of fruit. So, those are really good foods and they have fiber. So, that's what we really want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on the cascade of sugar that we want to make sure we touch on?
One more.
Yes.
Candida. Let's talk about like a candida fungal overgrowth. So 'tis the season, more alcohol, more wine, which could be full of sugar, is sugar. And then you're eating the carbs, the sweets, the appetizers that were coming, all day long during that 4 or 5 hour party. Well, we start to feed the fungi that live off of that sugar. They love that sugar. And then that changes our gut microbiome.
Yep.
it, then you may get more bloating, more discomfort,
Mhm.
because you're feeding that candida that lives off of that sugar.
Yeah. It's like Pac-Man.
Mm,
Give me more and I will
yeah,
grow.
and we're
Not a
eating.
good thing.
It's not a good thing, and it
No.
really can disrupt everything, even your sleep. And so again, we're talking about the cascade of eating some cookies or eating some processed sugar, or fructose, or but there is every system at the organs, they suffer from the amount of sugar that
Absolutely.
we're intaking.
And candida can manifest also with skin eruptions, hives, unexplained skin issues, sometimes is candida. So it's really important to get that addressed because it can take months to get rid of. Just depends on the protocol your doctor has you on and everything. But yeah, keeping it in check is important because people, especially your skin, that's something people don't want their skin to be affected. That's how we're seen in the
Mhm.
world. And it's maybe a vain thing, but I want my skin to look good, So I think
Mhm.
that's something that really, really hurts people when their skin isn't the way they want it to be and they're having
Yeah.
issues. So,
Even speaking just in the vanity of wrinkles, right? Jen, as you know, when we do that 7-day liver detox, my skin glows so much better because I've gotten off those carbs and those sugars, and my wrinkles seem to like not be so deep. And I'm like, man, the impact, the
yes.
cascade of sugar
Yeah.
that has on our body even just shows through our wrinkles.
Many of my clients have said that. They say like, is it possible my skin is better because it feels smoother and it looks more bright? And I'm like, yes, yes, and yes, right? By
Yes.
the way, you guys, so
Mm.
at the time of listening, it's December, what? December 19th of 2024, where our next 7-day functional medicine liver detox that Coach Emily is leading starts January 6th. So if you're
Mhm.
interested in this, reach out to us so we can get you all hooked up, get your kit delivered to you, and you're just going to love it. What a great start to the beginning of the year.
Mm.
So, yeah. So I wanted to, I know Environmental Working Group recently came out with a
Mhm.
study. Can you tell us about that? Because you made me aware of that. It was about a month ago.
Yeah, the blog that they wrote was EWG's Dirty Dozen Guide to Food Chemicals, which I thought was, oh, that's pretty neat because we all know the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15, but
Right.
this is the Dirty Dozen Guide to Food Chemicals and the top 12 to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And the 7 artificial dyes was on there, but I really thought was interesting was the aspartame. Let me find it. Yeah, the aspartame. And I thought that was interesting because that's in a lot of our food.
Oh, yeah. And be careful when things say sugar free, that's pretty much artificial sweeteners.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful with that word because sometimes people are like, oh, there's no sugars. Yay. It says sugar free.
Mhm.
Sugar free is almost always artificial sweeteners in there. So you really have to be careful of that word. Now, if it says no sugar, then there is possibly, truly no sugars whatsoever, including the artificial sweeteners. But be careful of the labeling, which is, frustrating,
Marketing.
very,
It's all
very
marketing.
frustrating because I feel like they're just trying to trick us all the time. But that's when you get with somebody that, love and trust that is going to help you read these labels. So
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
happy to help. Yeah. What about so we've got some people will ask me like, you know, table sugar, natural cane sugar, honey, maple syrup. How do you feel about those? I mean, it's still sugar, but is it better than artificial sweeteners?
I personally have found it, I've tested myself with my glucose spiking. I have found that maple syrup, monk fruit, some clients will really do like stevia.
Hmm.
Um, but those and honey, those are tend to be gentler. Again, we're talking about that cascade of sugar. It's more gentle on our gut, it's more gentle on our liver, because there is some natural around those kind of sources of sugar.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think those are really so much better.
Yeah.
Than the monk fruit. At least recently, I picked one up in the store and it has erythritol in it. So so I'm a little bit I wanted to talk a little bit about this because erythritol is coming up in so many products, especially once keto became a thing. And now I'm seeing it everywhere, like in all of these bars, and it'll say no sugar added, but then there'll be 8 grams of erythritol with it. It'll say 8 grams of alcohol sugars.
Mhm.
So should we be concerned about alcohol sugars?
My answer is yes.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. It's still sugar. It's still
It's
sugar. That's
still
how it's
sugar.
responding in your body.
There's not enough research, long-term data on it. And what's it doing to our gut? Is it causing leaky gut? Surely it's not preventing leaky gut.
Right, right.
Um, so
Yeah, so
we
it's
try to avoid
something
it.
to watch. Again, like if you could just go back to just natural forms of the raw honey, the grade A maple syrup, the real maple syrup, just a little bit here and there. But ultimately, like have a piece of fruit, have a sweet potato, when you get rid of the craving for sugar, which they say it takes about 14 days for your taste buds to change. So get through a couple weeks and you will start to taste the natural sugars in these. They'll be so much more pronounced and you'll be like, wow, I didn't realize how sweet a tomato is or how sweet a sweet potato is, on its own. So that's kind of nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into kind of our next segment here of the ripple effects of excessive sugar consumption, which you did cover a lot of it, but let's talk about quick of what's the short term, like as soon as you mentioned, you have the sugar, you have energy, and then you crash. What does that crash typically look like?
What does it physically look like? What
Yeah,
what are the signs
physically.
and
Yeah.
symptoms? Yeah, you want to take a nap, right?
Yeah.
You don't feel like doing anything. You don't want to get up. You don't want to, you lose that momentum,
Yeah.
right? It literally is a crash. The definition of the crash is like you're then just a blob. I
Mhm.
don't have that motivation anymore. I don't, the spunkiness, the zest. And that's because now your blood glucose is too low. Your insulin, your pancreas did its job, and now your blood glucose is too low. And then you think that you're hungry again. So you just continue eating when
You
you
might
really
even get
probably just
shaky, right?
shaky.
Shakes. Yeah.
Oh man, even worse, like the blurred vision.
Yep. Yeah.
Blurred
So it's good for
vision.
you guys to know this because you might be wondering, why is this happening to me? I must need to eat. And then all of a sudden, if you're choosing the wrong foods, you're having more things that are turning into sugar more.
Mhm.
And it really is putting the macros in their place of how much protein do I need, how much healthy fat do I need, and how much healthy carbohydrates. It's really coming down to that of what's good for your body. And then meal timing. How often should you be eating so you don't have those spikes? We want things to be even. And I'm same thing. I'm a huge fan of the continuous glucose monitor, and I wore one several years ago to try out for myself. And one of my takeaways is I was not at the time having enough protein with my breakfast. So I was able to change that because I was wearing the CGM on the back of my arm, easy to put on and monitor. It just came out with so much good information. So I'm a big fan of that device,
Yeah, and you don't even need a prescription anymore.
which is great. I
So good.
love
And
that.
it's
That's just this
you're
year, right? That brand
yeah.
this year.
And if you have an
Yeah.
HSA, your HSA can pay for it. And
So
you have
good.
a choice of 2 weeks or 1 month. And if, hire a health coach to go, help you track and what does this mean? And what do I do with this information? How do I actually apply it to like after I get rid of the glucose monitor? And then what does it mean? Why is it important to keep my
Yeah.
glucose low?
That's a good point, because you might, you're like, oh, I'm going to get this and get all this data, and then you're confused. Definitely have a health coach help you on that because we can help you to identify, oh, this is why this is
Yeah.
happening based on the food you ate just an hour ago. So we're
Yeah.
able to really drill down on that data to help you make the changes that you want to make. So I know we talked quite a bit about the long-term impacts, but one of the things was obviously diabetes, Alzheimer's, potentially brain issues, effects on the gut health, leaky gut. But I wanted to touch on the obvious one, weight gain, but hormone imbalances.
Mm.
That is a big deal. And a lot of people do not connect sugar consumption with hormone imbalances. But one of the things, when somebody tells me that they're having hot flashes, the first thing I say to them is, cut back on sugar and let's see how that does. And all of a sudden they're like, it's so much better. It's crazy how like some of the symptoms, but what other things do you see with hormone imbalances?
Yeah. Well, because it's a cascade. It affects your sleep,
Mhm.
right? So when you have a high sugar intake for the day, whether it's from a carbs or candy or whatnot, then your liver is working really hard. Ayurvedic medicine says between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., your liver is working from your previous day. And so if you had high glucose, high sugar spikes, your liver has to do all that work. Well, that's when you're supposed to be balancing your hormones and getting ready for the next day. But
Yeah.
if it's too busy cleaning up your previous day with so much sugar, And then trying to also get ready for the next day, you're already going to be out of balance with your estrogen, your testosterone, your progesterone, because now you're not getting that good solid 7 to 9 hours of sleep
Yeah.
because your sugars were up and down all day long, all night long when you
Hmm.
were trying to rest and recover. And it doesn't set the next day up very well. You may
Yeah.
have higher estrogen, may not poop as well, and
Hmm.
then your testosterone is a little bit lower, your progesterone may be low, you may be grumpy. Mm.
Yeah, so many things. And then the one back to skin, I just have to touch on this because I think the skin is a big thing for me. I've always tried to take care of my skin,
Mhm.
but sugar definitely dries it out. But now, as you get into perimenopause and menopause, most people know like there's a massive drying out. I'm just going to leave it there. But sugar enhances that. It enhances it, makes it worse. So that's just important to know. If you're having some symptoms hormonally, one of the best things you can start with is actually looking at like getting a reality check of your sugar consumption and seeing like what am I really intaking, so you can start making changes.
Which then we can also just plug in then the inflammation,
Yes.
right? Which goes along with the hormones and then
Mhm.
just the desires that you may have, just even sexually. Is if you're puffy, if you're inflamed, then you don't feel attractive. You don't feel like yourself. You're not that you don't have that vitality because you're struggling with that inflammation. And I know a lot of women that struggle with leg inflammation or feet or ankle swelling. And
Mhm.
I just cut out sugar and see if that inflammation goes down and you feel more attractive.
Sugar is evil. It just is. And it hijacks us. It hijacks our brain. So it makes us not think very well. So we don't want a drug to hijack our brain. So why would we want sugar to do the same thing, which to me is kind of like a drug, basically.
Well, it blocks absorption of
Yes.
nutrients.
So
And so it hijacks our nutrients. So when we're
yeah.
eating a good meal, but then we have high glucose and high sugar, then we're not absorbing all of those nutrients that we just
Wow.
ate.
Yeah. It's evil.
We can go on
All
and
right, so
on.
enough of the bad news, right? How about some strategies for managing it? Let's get on to the good stuff. We
Ah,
want to give you a little bit of a toolkit, especially going into the new year or anytime you're listening to this, of like, you're just like, oh, all right, I know, I see, I'm aware, and I'm ready to make changes. So, what are a couple of things that have worked for you, Emily, and also what has worked for your clients or what you recommend for them?
well, there's many, but I love the one of just drinking water, right? If you're going to a party, if you know you're going to be in that scenario or you know that you're going to be tempted, have your water and be drinking your water. And then extra squeeze in some lemon with pink Himalayan sea salt or Celtic salt. And then you feel satiated. And that actually increases your leptin hormone, that lemon. So then you don't feel like you're going to fall into that temptation of eating all that sugar.
I did not know lemon increases the leptin. And again, that helps you to feel full. Okay.
Mhm.
So just to remind you guys of that. So lemon. All right. Nice.
Lemon.
I like that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I did not know that. So one of the things like I think is getting real about your sugar too is like it's good to
Mhm.
track it. How many grams of sugar are you having? So you would add your added sugar, plus even look up, how many grams of sugar is in a piece of fruit that you're having, a banana, an apple, and all of that kind of stuff. We want our sugar from natural forms, but you might also be overdoing it. I've had some clients where we get off of all the desserts and then ends up they're eating a ton of fruit. Fruit is good, but anything too much is not good. So we got to be careful of that too. So tracking it first is kind of a good awareness and nothing, we don't want to judge or shame. We just want to get the data. Think of it as data and be like, okay, now that I have the data, I want to shoot for, 25 grams of sugar per day, something like that. So you had looked up World Health Organization.
Mhm.
What do they recommend?
Was it 25?
25 or less
25
per
grams.
day,
Mhm.
25 grams or less. And that's what is in our Institute of Functional Medicine as well. So that's what you kind of want to shoot for. But many people are 90 to 110 a day.
Mhm.
That's a lot of sugar. And
Yeah.
it's just getting worse year after year. And that's why we're seeing children being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. so much hidden sugars as well. So we want to, really read nutrition labels, figure out all of that. And then an idea that works with a lot of my clients, works for me, is trying to rely on some fruit. Fruit had gotten a bad rap for a while because it's like, oh, don't eat carbs, don't eat fruit. Well, fruit is actually good. You just don't overconsume it. So it's nice to kind of switch out, stopping eating all the desserts and all of that, ice cream, candy bars, and all of that, and instead allow yourself a serving, one serving, and I'm going to get back to the serving, um, having a serving with your meal, like at the end of your lunch or at the end of your dinner, you have a serving of fruit. Now, serving is one small apple. If it's a large apple, it's a half an apple. It's a half a banana is one serving. So you have to just be careful about what is actually a serving size because often we're like, oh, it's a serving. And in the meantime, there's 2 cups of fruit in there, something like that. So that seems to work a lot for people to be satisfied, to have that little dessert at the end of their meal and then never having like fruit on its own, always having it with the meal. You want your macronutrients together so that they absorb well and you don't get that insulin spike. So,
Yeah.
anything else you want to add to like tips for people with?
Uh, well, you reminded me that our DNA swab, the nutrigenomics test for sugar. Like, do you
Yes,
crave sugar? Right?
that's me. I have it. I got the
Ah,
DNA marker.
so yeah,
I think it's at
you're
both
just,
sides of the family, honestly. I think it's my mom and my dad. For sure, it was my mom. But
wow. I mean, that must be
it's
ex
like,
even extra
oh,
hard.
yeah,
Is that you have the genetic
such a
makeup to
craving.
crave sugar, and
Yeah.
that you probably in your taste buds enjoy it way more than a
Yes.
person that doesn't have
Yeah.
that gene.
But the fruit works really well for me in dark chocolate. So,
Mhm.
dark chocolate, 70% or more, so it needs to be the dark, but just like an ounce of dark chocolate, that is very satisfying. It really is. And you eat it kind of slow. Sometimes I'll have a little bit of berries and a square of chocolate, something like that. So then I feel like, oh, I'm having a little dessert and it's super satisfying. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, um, the last thing that I don't know if you've ever done, but I find it just like any addiction, if we can respectfully use that word addiction, um, I plan when I'm gonna have my sugar, especially if it's in excess. If I know that I'm gonna be going out to dinner and having the dessert or a party, and I know for sure I want to enjoy whatever that dessert is that's full of sugar, then I will prep days prior. I
Yeah.
will limit my glucose spikes. I will limit my sugar intake so then I can enjoy.
Enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I am so glad you brought that up because I think anything that you plan for, you're usually
Mm.
successful with. Prepping and planning are key to like anything, even meal prepping. When you meal prep, you tend to eat those meals and nothing else. Even in business, if we flip over to something like that, when you prep and plan, things work out well. But when we don't, if we just like, oh, randomly do this or that, you probably won't be
Mm.
very successful. So the planning part is really key. It sort of sends a message to the brain of, oh, I'm excited about this coming up. I'm going to enjoy that. So the brain is ready for it. It's just so ready for that. And that's all you do is you eat exactly what you expected to, and you're satisfied and happy.
Yeah, it's way more
How that happens.
stay,
Yeah. So,
yeah, like you just enjoy it more.
yeah. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else that we didn't cover on this very important topic of the cascade of sugar? Oh,
I just we're none of us are alone.
yeah.
I think that a lot of us struggle with sugar around, especially around the holidays. So I'm cheering you on.
Yep.
I'm rooting for all of us to stay true to
Yes. Me
ourselves and in
too.
alignment with our desires, and
Yeah,
we
because we
got
don't
it.
want all that other stuff. We've got this. We can take the reins and be in charge of our own health. So I have a challenge for all of you guys. And it's not to, you might be like, oh, she's gonna make me take away sugar. No, first step is take a 7-day sugar tracking challenge. Track your sugar for 7 days. You don't know what it is until you see, become aware of how many grams. You now know 25 grams or less per day is what World Health Organization is telling you to do, and then also Institute of Functional Medicine and many other organizations to be healthy. So track it first. That's it. That's
Yeah.
all you have to do, right? So I hope you take the challenge. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the subscribe button and please share it with other people. People that you care about, you're like, oh, I'd love for them to take this challenge with me, or maybe they need to know about this. Until next time, go out and you live your life with vitality. Happy New Year.